They've been called America's best idea, and now on the other side of the coronavirus lockdowns, they're reopening for eager visitors. America's 62 national parks preserve forever some of our continent's greatest natural treasures, from mountains and canyons to coral reefs and ancient forest. They're truly a lifetime worth of beauty and wonder to explore. But do we really appreciate what we have here on this continent? Have we fallen in love with it the way the psalmist and the prophets and even Jesus himself were plainly in love with creation? And do we see nature and our role in it rightly through the binoculars, you might say, of a Christian worldview? I'm Shane Morris, and joining me today is a pastor who's unquestionably fallen in love with nature and whose YouTube channel has become a hub for exploring and celebrating America's national parks. Randy Smith is senior pastor at Grace Bible Church in Allenwood, New Jersey, and the cameraman and adventurer behind the America's National Parks YouTube channel. Randy, welcome to the Breakpoint Podcast. It's a pleasure to have you.
Oh, it is a blessing to be on the show with you. I want to just sit back and listen to you after that introduction. That was fantastic.
Well, thanks. I mean, it's garnered based on watching some of your videos and seeing your obvious enthusiasm for nature and for the national park system. I mean, it just mirrored so much of the feeling I have toward the natural world and toward the idea of creation as opposed to just naked nature. This is not something that just happened. This is something that's put here for us to enjoy and to cultivate and admire. Randy, what sparked your fascination with America's national park system?
You know, I get that question often. Actually, it goes back to probably the early 80s. I was just getting into high school as my cousin, Kyle, was finishing up college. And he went on this incredible road trip. And he took some buddies with him and they visited the national parks. And that was probably my first exposure to the national parks. But I saw what he did. I saw the pictures that he brought back and that he showed to me. And that whole idea about going out and seeing the diversity of America. Now, this was before I was even saved, but it really piqued my interest. So I went on my first trip probably back in 95. It was the year I got married. And I don't know if you're married, Shane, or if you have kids, but there was about a 15-year lull of national park adventures. That first
I'm
trip,
married and I have 3 kids.
so
Try
I
to get them to
started up
national parks
again.
as much as I can.
People say, did you go to the national parks when your kids were little? I said, you know what? We went to the park across the street.
Yeah,
That was about the
exactly.
extent. But I just said, it's something that I really found interest in. You know, I was thinking of that great quote by Eric Liddell, the track athlete, right? That said, God made me fast, and when I run, I feel his pleasure. And I experienced that right away. So I went on my first trip in 95. I'm a believer at that point, and I just felt God's pleasure. I felt like I was in my environment. I felt like I was in God's world, seeing him in a way that I never experienced him before. And then, you know, you kind of back it up a little bit. And as you go through life, you start realizing you need to develop your priorities. You need to find out who you are, what's important to you, where your gifts are, how God has made you different from other people, what God has called you to do. And that is a responsibility, Shane, as you know, as a Christian, we have continually to be examining ourselves and making sure our life is lining up with God's direction for us. So the national park thing, really, to go back to your question, kind of fit into that. And what I always see it as is, for all of us as believers, God is, of course, on top of the pyramid. He is not part of the pyramid. He is the pyramid, and all things are done for him. And then below that is a family, of course, number one, and then my career and church life. But as a pastor, those merge together quite a bit. And then below that, I kind of have found out my identity. Instead of doing a lot of things, doing a few things and doing them well. And I have a quote ministry, a Christian quote ministry called Grace Quotes. I enjoy exercising, and then I enjoy the national park. So it just became something that I viewed where I can not only connect with my family going up that pyramid, if that makes sense, but also having that pyramid terminate with God's glory. So I accomplish God's glory, desire to live for God's glory, while ministering to and creating memories with my family, doing something that I enjoy doing. And to me, that is like the best of all worlds. So, you know, what's important for us a year from now, 100 years from now, 1,000 years from now? And it's investing in other people. It's worshiping God, because really that's all that matters when it's said and done. Those are the things that are eternal. And the national park adventure, we can go into more specifically, really accomplishes that for me.
Well, you've got bunches of videos up on YouTube just exploring the national park system, Q&As with you and your daughters talking about the parks that you've visited and your favorites. You have like a top 10 list where you go through the best national parks in the country. And I was really happy to see that Dry Tortugas National Park down in the Florida Keys made the list. You'll be shocked to know that I'm a lifelong Florida resident, except for 4 years in Virginia, but I've never been to Dry Tortugas. I've been to the Keys, I really enjoyed it, done some scuba diving there. But I'm sort of a West Coast Tampa Bay boy, and my family always went vacation down in the Naples, Fort Myers area in Sanibel Island. So it was that was our local hangout, and it was really quiet, and it wasn't as glamorous as the Keys, but we really enjoyed it. So I've got to get down there though to Fort Jefferson and Dry Tortugas because it looks absolutely spectacular. And um, I'm just touched as a Floridian, as a Florida man, that you would pick that at the top of your list, even after all those beautiful national parks out
Uh,
west.
a
Um,
quick comment on that one, real
sure.
fast is when I did that, it was a top 15. You really, for me, because I love the park so much, you can't really rank them. They are all so different. They're
Right.
so diverse. They're all beautiful. So it's hard to put them in a proper order. So I base that list upon my personal enjoyment. So I'm not saying Dry Tortugas is necessarily more uh, is grander than the Grand Canyon or Yosemite or Yellowstone, but based upon enjoyment, that not to spoil it for people that might want to watch the video, but that came in at number one, if you saw that.
Yeah.
And I took some flack from people out there. They're like, what's wrong with you? So I'm glad to hear I have a kindred spirit that supports, because we went there and we had the time of our lives. I loved it there.
I've heard the stars are just incredible, like gobsmackingly incredible out there.
Absolutely.
That's
Absolutely.
that's
It's just
amazing.
amazing. You mentioned Fort Jefferson. You got the history there. We
Right.
rented a kayak. We went out to the remote island called Loggerhead Key. Basically, had the whole Caribbean island to ourselves for snorkeling. And then we
Nice.
came out. We camped out on Garden Key, which is the main key there where the fort is. Everybody left, and we had that key to ourselves for 3 nights as well. We had a great time there. It was a lot of
That's
fun.
spectacular. Well, Randy, how does time and creation change us? I think there's a change that comes over us and sort of a recalibration when we get out and we, commune with God's creation. We see His majesty reflected around us. What do we discover in the overwhelming awe of both large and small scale wonders in nature?
Yeah, great question. Uh, I think what happens is when we get out in nature, we realize that life is bigger than we are. And when we get out in creation, and I use that word almost always when I speak in my videos that I talk about creation, it's nice to see a lot of Christians pick up on these things when
Hmm.
they watch the videos, that we see that things are bigger. And it's not just the things are bigger and the world is bigger than me and my problems, but really it points to a God that is bigger, because all creation, as we know, is there to reflect God's glory. And the more I can immerse myself in creation, the more it is a mirror. We call this general revelation, right? That
Right.
points back to the greatness of God. And we can even talk about that some more as well. So we see God, and I think the way you said it was well put. It resets our life. It gets us back to putting things in perspective. We have a tendency, even as believers, to just really think too much about ourselves. Pride is our biggest weakness. It's the root of all of our sin.
Hmm.
It's that love affair of self. And when we can get out in creation, we realize that I shouldn't think of myself more than I am. I shouldn't think of myself less than I am, because again, we are the apex of God's creation. We are the masterpiece in that sense of God's creation. Human beings are beautiful, but I just need to think of myself less. In a sense, it's the art of self-forgetfulness. So just thinking of me less, and creation really does reset that for, I think, all of us. And it gets my mind off of me. It allows me to, I think you used the word recalibrate, and understand that my priority is God. And I am just a small little microcosm on this universe when you consider it in a perspective, but yet one that God loves me so much that He would send His Savior to die for me. And when we really understand that from a biblical perspective, it puts us where we need to be in life. And when we chase that, it seems like all the rest of this world then chases us back.
Well, it sharpens the paradox of the incarnation, even because you mentioned how God came as a man to die for us in the person of Jesus Christ. And yet, this is the God who created the universe. This is the God who intimately governs the affairs of the Andromeda galaxy. And here we have Him just extravagantly expressing grace for us through this, in this tiny little place we call Earth, and that tiny little country we call Palestine. I mean, it's amazing. It sharpens it. It doesn't dull it. Um, Randy, I find, and of course, when you think about in the Old Testament, Job, what does God do when he wants to humble a man and bring him back into, recalibrate his perspective on his own sovereignty? He gives him a tour of nature. Job
Mm.
is, when God starts talking, it's pretty much a tour of nature. It's all the weather and the animals and the monsters of the deep. And then Job at the end of it says, I repent in sackcloth and ashes, dust and ashes. I didn't know what I was talking about. He claps his hands over his mouth because of creation, because of what God has expressed, and then said, I'm Lord of this all. These monsters of the deep, they answer to me. They're my pets. Randy, I find that not only does nature ground me, but it sort of resets my clock as if I'm moving at too quick a pace. What's going on here? Do you think technology is playing a role in distorting our internal rhythms as human beings?
Yeah. Yeah, I do. I do. I think we are going way too fast. I think this pandemic has taught us that slowing things down and being less involved in so many things has actually done good for ourselves and
Mm,
for our families. Technology, obviously, with all the notifications that we're getting, if we're involved on different social media platforms, are vying for our attention and getting the priority, Shane, of our attention as well.
yeah.
Right? I mean, I've been around people where their phone is dinging every 4 or 5 seconds. We need to get away from that. We need to excuse ourselves from those things and
Let me
get
just put mine on silent here real
that
quickly so I
matter
don't
than
look like a
anything
hypocrite.
else. Absolutely. Absolutely. God has given us, let's go back to creation. He's given us general revelation. And we say that that is seen in conscience in Romans 2. But in Romans 1, it talks about creation as well. That creation is there, that God's invisible attributes, that God's divine perspectives, that all that God is, his eternal power, his divine nature, have been seen. And the way Paul puts it, it's interesting, is it is clearly seen, even
Mm,
for the unbeliever. So, we think about the psalmist that said, only the fool in his heart says there is no God, that
right.
it is there. And when our eyes are opened by the grace of God and we are enlightened by the Spirit, we see creation in a much different way than we ever did before. And again, it goes back to that mirror that is showing us God's amazing greatness. It shows us God's beauty, God's wisdom, God's power, God's incomprehensible nature. All these things are a reflection back to who God is.
Do you think there's something in the natural world and creation that Christians can see, or at least admit they're seeing, that someone who's a non-believer or even a secularist or an atheist can't see?
Yeah, I do. And I think it goes back to, again, Romans 1, that all people are without excuse.
Hmm,
What does Paul also say in that text? That people are suppressing God, right? And I always compare that when I preach on a passage like that to someone holding, I'm from the East Coast, I live about a half a mile from the ocean, holding a beach ball under the water. You got to work hard to keep it down.
right.
It wants to pop up. And that's what you see so much in society of anytime there's anything related to Jesus or God talk or anything, the world just jumps on that so quickly. You wonder, why is there such a hatred? When we live in an age, Shane, of tolerance, where we need to accept everybody's opinion. But the moment anyone starts going down the God road, you just see the hair on people's necks sticking up. Why is it? Because it's that desire to suppress the truth and unrighteousness. And creation, Psalm 19:1, is declaring what? The glory of God. When we go outside, it is impossible to look around or even just look at you. You said you have children, to see the birth of a child
Mm,
and say, you know what? It all just evolved. It's impossible. I mean, I was talking to my kids recently. We went on a nice hike at the Delaware Water Gap. We did the Pennsylvania side, which is Mount Mincy. We hiked to the top, one of the tallest peaks there. And it's just an opportunity, kind of a Deuteronomy 6 opportunity with my children to say, "God, look at this, guys. How could the design of this leaf
mm.
just evolve? How could evolution produce the diversity of colors that we explore? How can we see the vast mountains, be yet these small microscopic bugs at the same time? I mean, the colors, the beauty, everything, and all working in harmony and symmetry with each other. it's amazing that there's a God out there. We say, we don't have enough faith to be atheists, because when we open our eyes, and that's why Paul says that all people are indeed without excuse, because you go out and there's clearly a beautiful, intelligent designer that made these things.
Yeah.
And creation does that for us. It is a testimony to who God is. And that's why the world, as we know, is accountable to God, even when they haven't heard the gospel, because general revelation declares God's glory and speaks of who he is. Of course, we come in with special revelation to share truth as to the good news about Jesus Christ and how he died for our sins. And if we receive him on the basis of faith, that he saves us by grace. But it does speak and it does show us God. And that's the beauty of a creation or a Christian when we go outside, that we can see these things and see God in the midst of them.
Well, just the fact that we look at creation and recognize beauty. I mean, there was a New York Times article last year at some point, and we did a breakpoint on it, and it was about the extravagance of beauty, and it was it detailed this new school of evolutionary thinking that says, well, you know what, beauty did not necessarily evolve to, and again, I'm slipping into the evolutionary way of thinking and speaking here for the sake of argument, did not necessarily evolve for the sake of survival. There's too much extravagant beauty that doesn't even serve an obvious survival end in, birds and butterflies and plants and all these living things. So therefore, there must be some other selection mechanism. And they talked about sexual selection, where females of a lot of species just like pretty guys. They like to see those extravagant feathers and those crazy colors and all that good stuff. But we took it in a different direction. We said that, well, we're assuming that all this beauty is designed for, the other birds and the other insects and whatnot. But what if it's designed for our eyes? What if it's designed for the image bearers who are here to, behold God's beauty and tend it and steward it? That's a really compelling argument. I think the extravagance of beauty is an underserved and powerful argument for, the design of everything. Randy, I want to shift gears here for a second, because you've done so much exploring in America's national parks, and one of the things that you note in several of your videos is that this tree or this set of geysers or this particular mountain range is unique in the world. There's something here that is truly special about the American continent. We have some treasures that no one else has. What are a few of those treasures that we just got to see as Americans?
Yeah. It's funny. I get comments, a lot of comments. I try to answer all my comments to the best of my ability, but I get a lot of comments from international folks. And frequently it's like, I can't wait to visit America, or
Cool.
you guys are blessed to live in that country. And I think, I love the fact that people are into international travels. I think that's great. I'm not trying to knock that, but I think I get concerned when people are talking about the international travels when they're missing so much beauty right here in America. And we have that diversity. I mean, you're from Florida, you have an amazing tropical zone down there. So you get down to the Everglades, as long as it's there until the pythons destroy it, that is. But that's an incredible ecosystem down there that is unlike any other part in the United States. And then you can get over to Big Bend National Park in Texas, and you're down there right on the Mexican border in this arid, rugged climate with a completely different appearance. And then head up to the Black Hills, or head over to Acadia National Park in Maine and see mountains that come right up to the East Coast, which you see nowhere else on the East Coast. So no matter where you go, even Olympic National Park in Washington State, there's a rainforest there. No, people don't know that, but we have a rainforest right here in America. So
one of the world's only, if not the only, temperate rainforest, right?
Isn't that incredible?
Yeah.
I mean, you got the mountains, we got 2 oceans, we got the rivers, we have so many things here. We have the Great Plains that are beautiful in and of themselves. The whole California region, southern Utah, probably giving you more than you want here right now, but probably one of my favorite locations. You have 5 national parks right there in southern Utah. You could take a week vacation and hit all of them for the most part. Incredible places, and they're all in a sense diverse from each other and unique. So I just think there's so much beauty right here in our country. And I talk to people in America, and most people in America, Shane, you're an outdoors guy, they'll tell you they've never been to any national parks, any of them. And I just would encourage people to get out, and I'd encourage people to get out. I think the concern that people have is it's hard to plan the trip, and it really isn't. Just we have the internet nowadays, and pretty much everything you need is right there at your fingertips. So I'd encourage you to get beyond that. And then the expenses. I mean, Shane, let's be honest here. I'm a pastor, with 4 kids and a wife to feed and a dog as well. I mean, the money's not rolling in here, you know. So I mean, if we can do, and you've seen the channel and how many trips we've done,
Right.
we have found a very inexpensive way to do it. Now, you have to rough it a little bit. You're not eating steak and lobster
Oh
every night,
yeah.
and you're not sleeping in a 5-star hotel. You're actually on the ground in a tent, but it can be done at a very affordable rate. Now, you know, let me also mention this too, kind of related to that. These trips on a personal level have done more for our family on a personal level, on a relational level, on a spiritual level than anything we have done. These are what stick out in our minds.
Hmm.
You know, the day-to-day operations, as much as we live every moment to the glory of God, are wonderful, but they all kind of, you'll see, they blend together after many years. But when you can take a daughter and hike to the top of Half Dome at Yosemite, I'll tell you what, that's our greatest memory that we have. Or a different daughter hike to the top of Mount St. Helens. Now, these are extremes. You don't have to go to that level. But the things that we are doing as a family are creating our best memories together. And not only the best memories, but I think the greatest stimulus to family dynamics, because you are forced to be together, sometimes in a tent, for 6 to 8 days. You're forced to be in a car together for a long time. And when we say, you know what, no electronics, there's nothing left to do but communicate. And when you're going through those tough situations, learn how to forbear, be patient with one another, be kind to another. How about even a 1 Corinthians 9, when you do these hikes that we do,
Right.
learning to discipline your body. You know, that is an art of Christian living, to have your mind discipline your body and control your body. You know, I always tell people, if you can't put down the bag of Doritos, you're not going to overcome the sexual temptations that many men experience, right?
Right.
You do a Grand, you can even go a mile in and a mile out of the Grand Canyon. Your body is saying, I just want to quit. You have to discipline your body, because you can definitely do it if you mind tells your body that I'm in control, not you are, and we'll stop when I feel like stopping. So all these factors are things that people oftentimes don't think about. It's not just going out and having a good time. That's true. But there's many more things after, you know, we've been married 25 years now, that we've seen develop within our family over these national park trips that have really helped our family dynamics and created greater unity and cohesiveness as a family.
Well, I was with you right up until you said the thing about turning off electronics in the car during long road trips. I can't survive without the electronics distracted. We need the digital sedation for the kids, at least in the car. So we got one of those little, you know, TVs that comes down from the ceiling in the minivan, and they can be transfixed for hours by that, and it gives us so much peace. But I totally agree with you. A friend of mine actually calls time in nature a necessary nutrient. He says it's something that you, as a human being, just need in order to be in a good state of mind. But it seems like, especially these days with the proliferation of electronics with our kids, and I say that as a millennial who has very young kids, they're already, you know, hooked to the electronics. It's like a drug. How do you peel them away from that? I mean, with your kids, you've probably had a situation where they've just been raised in the park system and in nature. But how do you peel kids away from that and get them to take their necessary nutrient, you know, to really begin to fall in love with time in creation?
I don't want to come off as the guy that's got the answer that does this. We are far from the
Randy
perfect.
Smith has all the answers, folks. So implement
Not
them.
even close.
Take note.
And I would say that when our kids were young, there are times, and maybe people disagree with it, where there's nothing better than putting a video in just to kind of
Yeah.
let them chill out and let mom and dad chill out a little bit more as well. So
Right.
I don't want to paint that picture. But as they get older, and we really, like I said, we didn't do a lot of the trips when they were young. There's some inherent dangers. There's just they just don't appreciate it. They'd rather go on a slide than see a geyser at Yellowstone. So I'm not going to take them 3,000 miles away when I can take them across the street. So, you know, they get older. And when they get older, now we're developing some more self-control. We're
Mm.
developing some more disciplines and lessons for life that are applicable as you get older, as a young adult. And part of it, let's just be very blunt here. It's a parent saying, it's not happening. You know, it's not happening. Put the phone down. I'm the mom, I'm the dad. We're the ones in authority. We know what's best, not you. and we are going to have a good time without electronics. You know, I didn't grow up in your generation. I grew up when we didn't have electronics. I mean, the coolest kid in the block was the kid that, like, his dad bought a VCR, you know, and everybody would watch like the 2 movies that they bought on it. And that's all you had. This was pre-cable television. This is how old I go back.
And if you want a song, you got to wait for it to come on the radio and then pop in the tape really quick and hit record.
It was
No,
the
I
story.
remember that part. I mean, you know,
I
early
remember the
90s.
days of having to get up and turn the channel on the television set. We're talking pre-remote control, you know? But I mean, it's like, you know, it's our job as parents to set the rules and to not let the kids lead the family. It's our job as parents to lead the family and to do what is best. They might not get it at the time, but that doesn't matter because they didn't get it when I told them they need to eat peas for dinner and not ice cream. So this is part of life. You know, this is part of them trusting their parents in having made good decisions for them that have proven to be faithful. And now when they're 13 years old and mom and dad say, you know what, we're going to put the phones down for a day. Or, you know, we'll give them some grace, maybe a half hour at the end of the day, you can get on and text your friends and send some pictures. But we're going to put the phones down and we're going to make sure that we have without any distraction, concentrated family time together where we can really talk to each other. You know, a funny story. We were in Acadia. My daughter and I were in Acadia National Park in Maine. Great, great place. Actually, my wife and I did our honeymoon there. So that tells you a little bit about my
Was that number 2 on the list?
the national park. My wife, no, first wife still.
Oh, no. No. Okay. Yeah, good one. I meant the national park. Was that number 2 or 3 on the countdown?
No, it was like around.
You got me there. You got me. Well done.
Number six. Number 6.
Okay,
Yeah.
that's right. Yeah, it looks like a beautiful place. I haven't been there. In fact, I've never even been to Maine. So
It's just, you could spend a week there and still find new things to do. But we were at a restaurant. My daughter and I were at a restaurant having dinner, and I look over and I see a family that are praying at the table. Mom, dad, and 2 kids. Now, first of all, you rarely see teenagers still hanging around with their parents. So that was encouraging to me. You know, we live on the boardwalk right by the beach there, and you always see everybody together, but you never see teenagers hanging out with their folks. So this is something that we're really pleased with, that our children still want to hang out with us, or that an old man like me still wants a daughter that enjoys being with her dad and going away on a nice one-on-one trip. But anyway, we're at this restaurant in Acadia, and I look over and I see a family, 2 kids, mom and dad, heads are down, they're praying at the table. And I tapped my daughter on the shoulder and I said, look at that. That encourages my heart. That really encourages my heart. And we're talking, I look over and they're still praying. And I'm like, wow, you're a believer. There's usually just that guide of how long you go with a prayer before the meal, and they had exceeded it. And I'm like, they're still praying over there. Wow, they must be really spiritual. And I look a little closer and they're all on their cell phones. Now, I wouldn't be surprised if they were probably texting each other at the table. But guys, put the phones down. And our world is so busy. We have so little time to spend together. When we do get these rare opportunities, maximize that time and make the most of the opportunity. And don't just have the small talk. Get into actual communication, sharing your thoughts, sharing your feelings, sharing your beliefs. Because these, when you spend it's hard to just grab a kid and have a deep talk. But when you're spending a week together, the opportunities present themselves a lot easier, and you kind of loosen up around each other a little bit more, where now you can have deeper conversations. And this is our job as parents, to kind of probe into their hearts and to talk to them and disciple them in these situations. And again, I don't want to make more out of it than it actually is, but these trips, Shane, have done so much for us in that regard.
I've heard much the same from parents on the other side of, raising teenagers, where they say that the things our kids look back on the most are these intentional trips where we just said, you know what, we're gonna stop trying to do everything right at home every single day, and we're just gonna have some times together. We're gonna go places. We're gonna put work aside and whatever else needs to be set aside, and just get out with the kids and spend some time with them. And those are the moments when they always look back and they remember them. And I look back on my own childhood and I see the same sort of thing, where my dad and I get together, and there's hardly a time we get together when we don't talk about that time that we went to the national forest in California, right near Yosemite there, where we did a summit adventure trip and camped on the edge of a cliff for a few nights, and then swam in this really, really cold lake with a name I can't repeat on in a Christian podcast. And it was just an amazing experience. And it really told me wordlessly how much I meant to my dad and how much he was committed to spending time with me, that he wasn't out, just having fun by himself. He wanted me to be there. He wanted to spend those few days with me, and then have spiritual reflections along the way. Talk to us for a second here. We're coming up on the end of our time, but let's talk about conservation and ecology a little bit, because those are sort of dirty words a lot of times in Christian circles, right? Those of us who are very conservative in our politics wonder, well, is this a power grab by the government? What is it that the Christian should think about ecology and about preserving the natural world? Is this part of our worldview?
Yeah, well, my perspective on that is I think we have, both as unbelievers and believers, we've erred on both ends. We've gone to extremes. You hear of a lot of Christians that because there is such a love for Mother Earth, Earth Day, and the worship of Earth by an unbeliever, that we have to let the pendulum swing so far the other way that we don't realize that we have a responsibility as God's creation, as the in a sense the apex of God's creation, to effectively steward creation. And I see, I don't want to worship nature, but I see nothing wrong with protecting and preserving nature. And I see nothing wrong with cleanup days. I swim in the ocean by my house, and it is a lot cleaner now than it was when we first moved to New Jersey 20 years ago. And a lot of that is a result of regulations at it. Now, again, I know there's lines that get crossed with that too. So let's not go to extremes here. And people that have gone out and made efforts to clean up the beach and clean up our oceans. And I'm benefiting from that. I'm benefiting from the people like Teddy Roosevelt and the John Muirs out there that have gone before us that said, you know what, they want to develop these lands. You're a Florida guy. Biscayne Bay is a good example. They wanted to develop those islands. Right. And a local community got up, a grassroots effort, the way I understand it, and they say, we got to protect this. And they did. And I've been to Biscayne Bay twice. Incredibly beautiful area. I'm thankful for those efforts. I'm thankful for some regulations that allow us to do these kind of things. I'm glad that we can still experience the wildlife and the animals. I mean, they're introducing the wolves now, I believe, back into Yellowstone. And these are all, I think, good things. We can go too far with them, but I see nothing wrong with being a good steward. I think that is our responsibility, to be a good steward of creation. We are called to work the field, so to speak, and that is our responsibility. But yet, with that said, I think we can go too far and begin to worship creation as well. And that's where it ends. Our desire for creation does not terminate on creation. Our desire for creation is to terminate to God. And creation then becomes a window for us to see God and to see his invisible attributes, as we talked about.
It's like Lewis said in Surprised by Joy, that if you focus on the thing that's bringing you joy, that's reminding you of the of the great joy for which you were created, then it's gonna become a source of idolatry and destruction in your life. It's no longer going to be reflecting that joy, because it was never the source to begin with. It was only a reflection of that joy, and that's what we find in nature.
It will let you down. It will let you down, because that's not how we are wired. God hasn't hardwired us to find our joy in nature. Nature is a means to find our joy in God. And something else really quick that popped in my head. I know we're running out of time, but what I've enjoyed is there are things that I can do with my YouTube channel to really boost my subscribers. I know what I could do, and I could just present the videos a lot differently. I can make them into almost, if you want to go here, here's the things you need to see, kind of the travel documentary, to give you the facts for people that would be travelers to go to a specific location. And I've been tempted, and sometimes I do that, but I've been tempted to go there, and I've pulled back because I've really kept them personal. Because what I get that those channels don't get are people writing and saying, you know what, I really admire the relationship you have with your children. You've taught me lessons about God that I've never understood before. You've given me a desire to go out and explore creation and explore it with the people I love the most and begin creating those memories. And I see the relationship that you have with your children, because we do one-on-one trips as well, as you see. And it's like, that doesn't just come when you go to a park. I'm not sitting down with them as we pull the camera out and say, okay, now I know we can't stand each other, but let's just put on a good show for the video here. What you see there is genuine. And that comes, I'm sure you and your wife are treating your children this way. These are years of building those relationships. And this is the overflow. This is the result of all those years of discipleship and investment and love and pouring into these kids that God has blessed us with, these souls. And it's neat to see it come out, and it's neat to see people see that, comment on that, and be inspired by that. Our church is a good-sized church. And as a pastor, it's hard for people to get to know me personally, but they can watch these videos and see a side of me, because I'm just a normal guy that they're like, you know what? I like that guy. He's a guy like us. Yeah. He's a guy like us that makes mistakes. He knows how to laugh at himself, and is just doing his best to raise his family in the way that he sees possible. So it's neat to see how it started with just love the Americans parks, but it's blossomed into things so much greater than that. And that's where I find my greatest satisfaction with the YouTube channel.
My guest today has been Randy Smith, a pastor, dad, and adventurer, and the guy behind one of the best outdoors channels on YouTube. It's an exploration and celebration of America's national park system. If you want to check him out, just come to breakpoint.org and we'll link you to his channel, or you can go right to YouTube and look him up there. America's National Parks is the name of the channel. Randy, thanks so much for joining me today on the program. It's been great talking with a fellow nature nut.
Amen. Thanks for having me, Shane. I really enjoyed being here. And the channel's America's Parks, just America's Parks.
America's Parks. Very good. Thank you.
Thanks, Shane.